Within this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to take this raw information that you usually have daily as you do transactions, having income, having expenses for your business, taking that information and creating a profit loss statement quite easily. So we will be converting this information to look like this. Quite simple, quite easy. Let's not waste time. If you want to join in doing this with me, go ahead and pause the video, download the practice workbook from the link in the description down below, and then let's get started on this together. So within this raw data file tab, you would have a date of the transaction occurring, the type of transaction being income or expense, then deciding which account to assign this expense or income to. So this will be done before the time, or even if you haven't done it, we can then do it together. I will show you where I will be creating this. Then having manual detail to that type of account. So when we're doing internet, what type of internet expense was it? It was a data being purchased, or it was hosting being paid, whatever you decide, and the value. Now, before we do the next steps to creating this, we will create the relevant type of table, which we refer to as an income and expense, then creating a drop-down dependent list linked to that. So I will go and create a new tab, which is what you can do. In there, we will call the first one being a type of the account. So the type will be either income or expense. Then once we've selected that, we need to either have the accounts linked to the income or the accounts linked to the expense. So I'll just space it. I will call it accounts. And the type of account that falls under income. Now, I will go to my raw data and identify what are all those accounts linked to income, because I've already done a lot of them. If you haven't and you're just starting out, this is where you can decide. So your income, you can either call your YouTube ads income if you have that already. Yeah, maybe you are already well known in the YouTube community, so you could also be having sponsor income, and you could be selling merchandise, so you can call it merchandise sales. Whatever it is, this is your personal decision of naming it, but not having too much. So when you talk about merchandise, this covers all merchandise across any platform being sold, for example. But as I said, an expenses will be the same case. So let's just go to raw data if you have the same case. Just next to it, now I'm using Microsoft 365, which has the unique formula in there function. So I will be typing equal to unique, open parentheses. The array I'll be choosing is obviously B and C. So it's B to C, comma. I would like to receive the unique rows, so it is 0 being false, and I'd like it to be every distinct item, so it's also 0 again. Close parentheses, enter, and now I have being income and expenses. So I will just copy this, the entire section, and then just next to that, paste in values, so I know it can't change. So I will just select all of these accounts and I will say sort from A to Z. It will look in the first column. There you have all your expenses and all your incomes that are unique. So now I will just select them, copy, go back to my new sheet created. Under accounts, I will paste that. So now I know under accounts, those are all my income accounts associated. Let me just call that income accounts, just for clarity. And then next to that, I will have expense accounts. So again, I'll be going to raw data. I've already got them here, so I'll select all of them, Control C, copy to the new sheet and paste them right there. Now, obviously, if you want to have this alphabetized, that's up to you. I don't really bother with that so much. So what I'll do now is convert this to a table range. So I'll select the 3 and I'll say insert table. and it has a header, so I'll select the checkbox, press OK. That has been created. Let me do the next one again. Insert table, also has headers, yes, okay. And the next one, the last one, table as well. Now that we have done that, this becomes easier to use within a drop-down dependent approach. So now I will go and click on the first one, table design on the top right of the menu list. Then on the top, we want to call it type, enter. The next one we want to call income. That's our income table, enter. And the next one being expense, enter. So in the future, if you want to add more, you just type it underneath. The table will extend automatically to include the next list as needed. If you need to remove, you right click on the relevant one, say delete rows. That's all you do. So now that we've got the three tables relevant to where they need to be, we go back to raw data. I can then just clean this up by deleting that text. Now I shall select all of them by Control A. It selects everything. I will then turn this into a table as well. So I will say insert table. Yes, it has headers. Press OK. And now we have the format as needed. This also becomes dynamic going forward. So as you have more expenses, it will be automatically added to this table. Now that we've got this, we have to ensure that the income is also linked to the account type going forward for you to easily amend as needed. So right now, click on the one cell. You can go to data, data validation. Now, importantly, you'll have to note that you'll select list, and in that list, you'll be typing indirect within parentheses, and you don't forget to type the double quotations as well with type. When you press OK, now it amends that to everything within this column. The same case to account, you will go to data, data validation, and then now here, you won't be referring to income or expense because that is the dependent cell that will change. So therefore, you need to type in indirect and the relevant cell that needs to change, the relevant text within that cell. So the cell is B, and I put the $ behind the column, not the row, because each row is relative, but the column is fixed. So we press OK, and now we know that if I change this to expense, I should have a drop down that is linked to expenses. There we see the example. So let's just change that back to income. And we have just created all the relevant table ranges as needed. Now, to accommodate those out there that have business expenses that also is partially used for personal reasons, you obviously cannot account the entire cost towards business. We have to accommodate that situation as well. So this is where we will create another one on the side. So when you do create a new column right next to it, it will include it. So let's call it expense percentage. You'll see it's already extended. And then we have to have a final value. So if now let's just change the format of this detail as well. So I will just control shift and down to select all of the table rows within this column. Go to my home, ensure that it's percentage. And then if I say within an expense, now income will not be relevant. This is only expense. So there we have internet. So I know that this is 100% expense relevant to business. Then my final value will need to calculate the new one. So this is where I would type in an if statement equal to if, open parentheses, if the type, now you'll see that I click that and it says add type. You can leave it like that, but I like being specific. So I will type it in $, and that falls in column B. That is fixed, but the row is 2, so that is relative. That will change as I copy it down. If the content within that cell equals to expense, then you need to take the value. Again, we'll see that it says within that column, but I prefer my cell reference. So comma, $, we are talking about E2. So if that is equal to expense, I'll take the expense value and I will multiply it with the percentage, which is in column F2, and I'll get my value of expense relevant to business. If it's not an expense, then it's an income. So then the entire value that's come from that is considered a business income. So I will just say it's equal to $E2, close parentheses, enter. Now that I've done that, we've seen that everything has populated down as needed with that formula. I'll just copy the format of $ as well. Down, Control V. Now the reason we have zeros here is because we don't have percentages relevant to our expenses. That's the only part that you need to consider going forward doing. So let me just filter on expense here. And for the sake of ease, let's just say all of them are 100% business related. There we go. Let me unfilter that. Okay, now that we have this, the last part you need to add to make it easy to filter within months, because even if I go and select the entire column here and change the format to only display month and year, in the background, it still acknowledges it as being a day specific date, not a month specific, even if you change the format. So to accommodate where you compile everything into 1 month, the way I do it, I add another column and I call that month dash here. And then I use end of month formula equal to end of month, EO month, open parentheses. I take the date. Again, I don't like referring to the table. So it's again $A, and the first row we're working with is 2. So we take that date and we go to the end of that specific month. So I won't look a month ahead. I'll look at the end of month of that month. So it's 0, close parentheses. Now this gives it to you in numerical order. If you want to change that, let's just change that to the current. Let me take that format as before. You put it there. And if I copy paste down. So when you go and look at all the January dates, you'll notice that the corresponding column will show you everything being the 31st of January. Perfect. So when everything's compiled, it will form onto one date, one option. Now, when I don't want to see the end of the date, now I can select the entire column again, go to formatting. Now I can right click and just click format cells. Wait for the box to open. Then within my custom, I will make sure that I choose MM-here. Now this can be changed. If you don't want to see January like that, you want to see the full name, you quadruple M. If you do want to see the entire 2020, you do 4 Ys, but I prefer having 3 letters to my months and 2 numbers to my year. So I press OK. Now everything has been displayed properly in the way I prefer. From own experience, I would also say it is maybe good to add in another column, which I would refer to as location reference. And that is just to help you in the future to refer to where you can find proof of your income or proof of the expense made on that date. So these days, a lot of transactions are done via online purchases. Therefore, you'll have more email references, or you could even have your website reference to saying where you can find it. It just becomes easier for you to refer to in the future when your accountant needs proof of certain expenses or certain incomes. So then you don't have to daily go and print this and put it in a file, but actually have an easy way of just saying, I know where to find everything. And if there's ever a question, I can just easily refer to it. So here I can say the first time it says YouTube AdSense income. So maybe there is an email proof. So you can say email proof on this date, on the 1st or the 21st of, this was January, so it's the 21st of December 2019. So then you know you can go to your email on that date, and you can even put a time in there if you wanted to. That's just your own manual preference. Now that we've got this, now we're finally ready to create our pivot table for our statement. I will now select all by selecting anywhere in this table and then pressing Control A as it selects all of the relevant information. Then I will select Insert Pivot Table. Currently this table is called Table 8. We will change that later. We will then just say put it in a new worksheet. Yes, press OK. And there a new one has been created. Before I do any changes within the pivot table, let me just go and rename the worksheet tabs underneath. So this one I can say will be my P&L statement. And then also I forgot to change where my tables are. So I can just rename that to calling it my data reference table. And we can go back to P&L statement. Now within the profit and loss statement pivot table, we will go and in our rows, we want to see our accounts. That is fact. So let's put our accounts, and we'll notice that everything on the left will be a mixture of our income and expenses. Now we need to make sure that they are separated. So we will go to type and put it in the same but above accounts. And we have our expense and income. In a profit loss, we want to see our income above expense. So I will just select income and let the cursor change to that one being a cross with the arrows, move it up whilst holding it in, and you'll see expenses go to the top. We don't want grand total because grand total usually adds something up or does count ifs, but it never does a subtraction. So we will remove that by right clicking on grand total and saying remove grand total. And then just make sure we select somewhere on the pivot table. The value we want to add up will not be our original value because some of them might be different based on the expense. So we will choose our final value column, put it in our values box, and there we have our values of each income and each expense. The important one to note here is that this is a sum of the entire data currently in our raw data. So this goes from January all the way down to the 2nd of April 2021. Now let's go back to P&L statement. Let's change the format of the number being shown as a dollar or a currency sign. Right click on any of the values, choose number format. I like choosing accounting, and then okay, so let's choose Cherokee United States, fine, okay. And we have our dollar sign, which is the method of our, I like it being shown. The row tables, so the format here is maybe not entirely what we want, but we'll get to that. We would like to see in our profit and loss statement, we want to see our income, our expense, and we want to see the net profit. How to accommodate this within the pivot table, we will then select income or expense. We'll go to pivot table, analyze. Then we will have fields and items and sets. There we will create a new item. And that new item, we'll call it net profit dash loss, because it could be a loss. And we will, in our formula bar, the formula will be income minus expense. Press OK. Once we've done that, that is a calculated result underneath. Now this is where it looks at every line and subtracts them to give you a value underneath. But we don't want to see the breakdown. We just want to see the total, and that top one is important. So we will collapse that specific one to not see the sub detail, but only the main detail. Then we will unselect buttons. That way you cannot easily expand this again. We will also remove the field headers, as road labels is not something we want to see. So we'll deselect field headers. That falls away. Sum of final value is not maybe the word you want to have there. So we'll select it, press F2, and we can just delete that and call it maybe actuals. Press enter. I'd like to see it on the left hand side, so I'll go click home, or I'll like to see it in the center. Center's perfect. So the information is quite compact, so let's just space it a bit. Let's click on design, and in our left hand side we'll see blank rows. We can say insert a blank line after each item. And that is where you see, okay, nicely spaced. But we also don't want to see the totals of the expense above all the expenses or above all the incomes. We want to see it below it. So we'll go to subtotals and we'll say show subtotals at the bottom of group. There we have nicely, it's called income with all its income and the total. Same with expense and its total. Now the formatting here is maybe not to my personal liking, maybe it won't be to yours. We already have a list of a lot of options here that you can change it to. So let's select another version, maybe that one. I'm not a fan of that really. So I like doing the following, where I would actually select the most basic one, which is the following, as seen below. If I'm happy with that format, I can then leave it and then just add in the lines where I feel is necessary. So above income total, because it's a subtotal, I'll select that and I'll go to home and I'll say add in a top border. So we have that. Again, with expense total, the same case, a top border. And then with the net profit being the actual final value, I will then put a double border underneath with a top borderline. And there we have our profit loss statement given for the entire table. Now, when you want to be a period specific, for convenience, we can start working on a lot of template changes where you can add in columns, move things around, remove grid lines if needed, but this is not really the focus. It was just to get you to create this. Now let's add in a slicer, as a slicer is a very convenient way of adding filters. Again, pivot table analyze. Now we have two options when we're talking about date. We have timeline and slicer. Now this becomes your personal preference. If I do insert slicer, the filter type will be our month year. Because if I do, and I'll show before I click on month year, if I had chosen just date, if I had not created this end of month option of month year and I chose date, you will notice that if you wanted to filter, you would have to filter literally choosing which day. And that becomes a very, very long list. So let us delete that. Let us insert again, pivot table analyze, insert slicer, month year. There we go. Let's add that to two columns so it just looks a bit more spaced and better. So there we have, we can choose, we only want to see what the income and expenses are for January. If I select that, everything updates as needed. If you want to multi-select, let's click that button above and then you can multi-select as needed. And you can choose, maybe you start March till April the following year, or March till February, or maybe April till March. It depends on your country, your financial year as well. And this is what you can then issue to your accountant. Now, if you want to start working on the aesthetics of what you are looking at, obviously, like I said, you can add in a bit more columns. You could move this to the side. Let's just space that column a bit wider. You could change the look of the slicer, top right slicer. There are a few predetermined template options. If you want to change that, you can just click on that and say add new slicer style, where with each part here you can go and do specific changes. I really hope you enjoyed that process. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to your questions and feedback if I missed anything.